Thank you. Before we start, I wanted to ask, how many people here have honestly never been to a Walmart? Okay. How many people?
It's okay to admit it.
Okay. How many people go there, once a month? Once a week? How many people go there all the time? Okay. All right. How many people don't even have a Walmart in their neighborhood? Anybody? Oh, this is not your crowd.
I need your addresses.
Right. Okay. So
Walmart.com.
now you're going to learn everything you didn't know in 30 minutes about Walmart.
A place you never go and may not care about.
No, I actually went to prepare for this. I went to prepare for this interview. I went to a Walmart. I can't say that I'm a regular visitor, but I went to one in the Washington area, and I walked in my suit, and they kind of said, "Sir, are you in the right place?" And but it was very friendly. I got a lot of good bargains there, and maybe I'll go back. It was good. No bad experience, so it was very good. I didn't tell him I knew you, though, but if I did, I'm sure I would have got even better treatment.
Wouldn't have helped.
So Doug grew up in Arkansas, and he was a high school basketball star, right? Played guard, center, every position. Chose not to play in college, went to University of Arkansas, got his MBA at University of Tulsa. In 1991, he worked full-time at Walmart, and risen up to be the CEO, the fifth CEO since Sam Walton was the first CEO. Today, Walmart is a company with roughly $500 billion in revenue, a market capitalization of roughly $250 billion, and 2.3 million employees. So that's a lot of employees. There's no other company in the world that has that many, no other company with that many employees, right?
Chinese military.
Okay.
More.
Right, okay. No other American company, certainly. So let's ask about Walmart. Let's say 20 years ago and 10 years ago, people thought Walmart was going to eat up all of retailing. If you were going to buy anything, it had to be in Walmart, and you were growing at enormous pace. Then Amazon came along, and everybody thought, well, there's not going to be Walmart anymore because Amazon's going to have everybody buying things online. Now you are doing a lot online. They're doing some physical stores. Are you the two big giants? Is there anybody else out there that's going to be big in retailing? Just the two of you?
No, I think there are going to be other competitors, including, we're in 28 countries, so there'll be a bunch of competitors around the world.
Okay, so today, in running Walmart, what is your biggest challenge today? The biggest single challenge?
People.
Hiring people? Keeping them?
Does anyone here like to change? I'm all for it as long as it's not for me. That's generally how things go. But we're trying to take a company that's now over 50 years old and has grown up doing a certain thing and pivot to a new way of thinking without forgetting everything that's valuable from the past. And that's a human behavior leadership issue.
Okay. What enabled Walmart to grow from a small store, one store in Bentonville, not exactly New York or Los Angeles, Chicago, a small little city? What enabled it to grow to the biggest retailer?
Culture and business model, both of which we got from our founder, Sam Walton.
And did you ever meet Sam Walton?
I did.
Was he
awesome?
Hey, did he ever say to you, you're going to succeed me someday or something like that?
No, he didn't know my name.
Oh, okay. Now, you're in his office now.
I'm in his office now.
So did he leave any notes or anything for his successors?
He did. Sam left a lot of things to follow. We have values, we have purpose. Those things came from him. We have an EDLP business model that came from him. And at our shareholders meeting the first week of June, we got to do something that I'd been wanting to do for a long time. And that was to have Sam appear on stage in front of 14 or 15,000 people in the form of a hologram. So we took his audio from a shareholders meeting a long time ago. He passed away in 1992. And at the end of my message, I stepped off the stage and said, I want you to listen to Sam. Those of you that didn't get to meet him, here's a little flavor of what he was like. And it was awesome. It was.
I think they might be doing that about you in 30 years or so?
I hope not. Probably not. It'll still be Sam they're talking about.
So today, is Amazon your biggest competitor?
Yes.
And is it fair to say that Walmart maybe missed online retailing a little bit?
Only by a decade.
Oh, a decade, okay. All right. So when you figured out that they were eating your lunch in certain ways, what did you do?
We're playing catch up, and a lot of that goes back to the change from within. So we had some beliefs, and I'm not pointing fingers because I was part of it, but we thought the internet's going to end up in retail being about the size of the catalog business. Instant gratification is going to always matter. We're going to have stores near all the customers. There are 120,000 items in there. How could you not find what you want at Walmart? keep executing, play around with the e-commerce business model, but our philosophy was based on what we had experienced before, which was prove out that the model can make money in the short term and then scale it. That's what we'd done with all the other businesses we'd started, and we'd done a bunch of them. But in the e-commerce world, it turns out you don't have to make money for like 15, 20 years. Scale it first and then make money, and we weren't thinking that way.
All right, well, another competitor that came along was Costco, and then you built your own equivalent, I guess, Mr. Sam's. But Mr. Sam's is closing. You were the head of it for a while, but Mr. Sam's is closing some stores. What's the problem with Mr. Sam's?
So it's called Sam's Club.
Sam's Club.
Yeah, we got to get.
Mr.
We got to.
Mr. Sam's. I've never shopped there. I've never shopped at Costco.
This is not a problem
either.
I usually have.
Yeah. I've never been to Costco either, I should say.
Really?
No.
Wow. You should go into a Sam's Club and then maybe a Costco and check it out.
Okay, I'll try to find one. I don't think they have
Yeah,
one around there.
they're great. They're different than a Walmart
Right, so
store.
yours has, you have had some problems at Sam.
Yeah, so what happened with Sam's is we started in '83. Sam made a visit and met Saul Price in San Diego when he founded Price Club. Sam Walton said, man, that thing's cool. It may disrupt everything else we're doing, so let's learn from that and let's start it. We grew up over the years. We bought other wholesale clubs. At one point in the U.S., there were 8 of them. Now it's basically 3 with BJ's. And as the others went away, we bought them. And we bought some real estate locations that are challenging, and we lived with them for a long time. And so in January, and we've done this in other countries too, we went through the entire portfolio as we try to be fit for the future. And clubs that lost money or had other significant issues, we closed. That resulted in about 10,000 people being displaced in those Sam's Clubs. We tried to hire as many as we could back into Walmart stores or Sam's Clubs that were nearby. We ended up getting about 4,000 of them to stay with the company. But it was painful.
Okay, so today you have what percentage of your sales, you have about 500 billion in sales, what percentage of that is online?
Very small. We're about 12 billion in online sales.
So that's where you're going to have your growth, I presume.
Yeah, last year we grew at about 44%, and we need to be growing at that rate or higher for a long time.
Now, you've made some acquisitions, I assume, to get you more actively involved in online. So you bought for 2.2 billion, I think.
3.3 billion.
For Jet.com?
Yep.
And was that worth the 3.3 or?
Yeah, so far, well, we'll see.
Okay.
I do it all over again. So it was a billion.
What do they do?
They were an e-commerce company that was starting to really get scale because they had some cool features on their website and a great leader in Mark Laurie. But at the time we paid 3.3 billion, they only did basically $1 billion in sales or gross merchandise value, and they lost money. So it doesn't really on the surface make sense to pay $3.3 billion for that. But we picked up smart cart functionality, some really cool enhancements that they had done with their website, leadership that took over responsibility for Walmart.com. And as Dan knows, a lot of the world said, oh, Walmart's finally serious about the e-commerce business. Well, at the time, we were doing north of 10 billion in Walmart.com, and so we were already 10 times that size, but nobody knew it. So we now have a situation where people are paying closer attention to Walmart.com. We've made a lot of enhancements, 2-day free shipping. We now got 75 million items on the website, first party, third party. And it's getting better.
You have a business now that I don't know if Amazon gave you the idea or where you got it from, but people can order online products and then just go and pick up the thing right at the store?
Yeah, grocery pickup. We got it from the UK. We have a business in the UK called Asda, and in the UK, grocery delivery had been a big thing for almost 15 years. And so what happens is you learn how to pick your grocery order in the store with your own associates. Customers can then in the UK get it delivered. But in the US, with that pickup capability, we in the United States drive a lot. And at least most people do. You may not. But in the US, like in the middle of the country, that part that some people just fly over, there are people that will order on their mobile app.
People always honking the horn when I'm driving, so I try not to drive that much, but okay.
So it saves you time. You order on your mobile app, and then like if you're a mom and you're going to pick your child up from school, you can come by after you pick them up, and we'll put it in your trunk for you.
Now, when Walmart was started, there was no groceries. Sam Walton didn't have groceries. It was other kinds of things. What propelled you to be in the groceries, and is that by far the biggest part of what you sell now?
Yeah, grocery and consumables, counting like cleaning supplies, paper goods, stuff like that, is about 55-60% of our sales now. And we added it to a Walmart general merchandise assortment to create a supercenter, and that was led, while Sam was still with us, by the CEO that followed him, David Glass. And David had been a grocer, and they had seen hypermarkets in Europe, and our first efforts in the U.S. were really big hypermarkets, and we put them in Kansas City and Dallas, Arlington, and they failed miserably. We were so bad at running these really big stores. We actually had people that came and clocked in to work and then went home. We had no idea how many people we'd hired. We probably had 1,000 people working in those hypermarkets. So that didn't work, and we learned how to create a smaller version of Supercenter that actually did work.
Now, you have more employees than any company in the United States, but sometimes you've been criticized for not paying them enough or not paying enough benefits. How have you tried to address that problem?
Yeah, so in the beginning, we had associates that were making above minimum wage and profit sharing because the Walmart share price was growing so much that they were very happy. They stayed. People became wealthy. Then when the share price levels out, we didn't pivot as aggressively as we should have to other forms of compensation. We still were paying above minimum wage, but when I moved into this job in 2014, the number for starting wage rate, and starting wage rate is not the whole story. You've got to understand what the mean looks like and what max looks like and all the rest, but let's focus on starting wage rate for a second. We were paying under $8. We decided that we wanted to improve our store experience, make a bet on people, and do some other things. So we raised the wage rate to $9 starting wage, and then to 10, and then to 11. So since 2014, we've gone from under 8 to starting at 11. Our average is now approaching 15. We put in 200 training academies around the country so that people can start getting the skills they need to advance in the company, or if they leave, they have skills that are portable somewhere else. 75% of our store management started as hourly, and a store manager on average makes about $170,000 a year. So we're trying to create a meritocracy where people want to become a department manager and make 15, 20 or more an hour, and eventually become an assistant manager making 50 plus, and then become a store manager.
Now, a lot of your products, I assume not the groceries, but others come from China or overseas. You're the biggest importer of products from China. Is that fair? Or one of the biggest?
Probably.
Okay, so we might be in a trade war or tariff war with China. Is that going to affect you, and you're going to have to increase prices? And have you talked to President Trump about this?
We've talked to the administration about it. And do perpetually, and try to make sure everybody knows what the whole story is. In the U.S., because of food and consumables and other things, we sell about 2/3 of all the goods that we sell in the U.S. are made in the U.S. So the other third comes from China, Vietnam, other places. Think apparel, think Christmas trees, stuff like that. So a few years ago, I'll come back to trade in a second, we, as we do in other countries, developed a local purchasing program to go and increase the amount of U.S. goods we buy by $250 billion over a period of years. So we started convening governors with suppliers, with people that wanted to build factories, parts suppliers, to try and deliver enough items to get us to 250. So we're actually bringing back some bicycles and some other items that had left the U.S. a long time ago, and I'm excited about that and trying to do it. It hedges a bit. When you're a retailer and you can buy the inventory you want to buy closer to where your stores or your e-commerce business is, you can reduce lead times. You don't have to order so far out. There are advantages to being local, including the people that shop in your stores have jobs. So as it relates to trade, we have a business in China. Not only do we source from China, but we've got over 400 stores in China. We've got an investment in JD.com in China, an e-commerce player.
JD.com is the biggest retailer in China.
There's Alibaba and JD, kind of a 10-cent ecosystem that's out there, and we're a member of that group. And so as it relates to the U.S. and China, we're very vested, and we talk to both sides about the benefits of free trade. Now, we're for fair trade too. We can all debate over the approach that people take to try and get to the appropriate level playing field, if we want to call it that.
Now, in India, you just spent $18 billion.
16.
16, oh, I thought I got it. 16,
So far, 16 billion.
16, okay. 16 billion, a modest 16 billion to buy controlling stake in Flipkart.
Yeah, we're waiting government approval, but we intend to buy 77% of Flipkart, which in India is an e-commerce business, a payment platform, last mile logistics, and a bit of a retail ecosystem that looks to us like what we're learning from China as it relates to how retail is going to evolve and what that ecosystem looks like, right, which will apply lessons back to the U.S. and other places.
So do you go into Walmarts a lot yourself?
Yes.
You do. So if you show up in the local Walmart, do you tell them in advance you're coming?
No.
All right. So when you show up, do they recognize you, or does somebody have a picture that if this guy shows up, make sure that, they don't have that picture?
Usually if I'm not near our home office, people won't recognize me unless they're in management, and the managers recognize me. So I usually get into the store. Like when I'll go on a store visit somewhere, I'll show up, I'll walk in the door, don't tell anybody I'm there, and start experiencing the store. And I'll find associates and go up and introduce myself. I usually have my badge on because it's not, I want them to know I work for the company, but it just says Doug on it. So I'll start asking, how's the store going? How's your manager? What are your biggest challenges? You know,
They
what are you
say none of
struggling
your
with?
business or anything like that?
No, they tell you.
They tell you.
They want you to know. Everybody likes to
Okay.
talk about it. So then eventually management figures out I'm there, and, you know, they freak out a little bit and then recover.
Has anybody ever been fired as a result of your walking around looking things and they weren't happy with the way they were doing
It's
things?
rare.
Oh, so yes, a couple times. Okay. All right.
I mean, in our business, you can do everything right, and if you've got a store manager who's not capable of doing the job, hasn't been prepared, it all fails.
So the single most sold item in Walmart is what? Is it
Bananas.
bananas? All right. So I don't buy that many bananas, but what does a banana go for? I mean, is that a big high
67
margin?
cents. Not a lot of margin, but 67 cents a pound.
That's the most popular thing that you sell is
We
bananas?
sold over 1 billion bananas last year.
Wow. Okay. And what's the second most popular item?
That, you know, it starts to vary, but it's produce, it's milk, it's bread, it's
Okay.
that kind
And
of
your
stuff.
margin on products is roughly modest, 1 or 2% or something?
Well, on a net basis, we're down below 3%.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about your own situation. So you're a high school basketball star, but you didn't want to go to the NBA, right?
I was not in danger of that.
Right. Okay. So you got an MBA, you joined Walmart, but at the time you joined, did you ever think you could rise up to be the CEO? And what do you think enabled you to rise up among, millions of people who were looking for that job?
Well, the very first day, so my dad was a dentist. He moved us to Bentonville, Arkansas. That's where Walmart was born, and I didn't know. I'd been in a Walmart store in my hometown of Jonesboro, but I didn't know the story of Sam Walton. And we show up in Bentonville, and Dad says, get a job. You're going to need to pay your way through school. McDonald's pays $3.35. Walmart Warehouse 2 pays $6.50. So I'm like, sign me up for $6.50. So I get a job at the warehouse unloading trucks, and there's this guy named Johnny this hot summer that they pair me with to unload Walmart trailers, and Johnny loves Walmart. And he's telling me I've got $200,000 in profit sharing. I've been here for, I don't know, he might have been there 10 years. I'm going to be here for 10 more, and then I'm retiring, and I'm getting a new truck. He's just telling me, and I'm like, this guy is unloading trucks, and he's in love with this place. That's interesting. Then you start hearing the story about Sam, and then I met a girl that wanted to live in Bentonville, and we got married. So I wanted to work at Walmart.
All right. So what do you think it was that enabled you to rise up? Was you were smarter than the others? You worked harder? You liked Walmart more than others?
I just
What do you-
really liked it. So it's a really hard challenge. I mean, imagine trying to anticipate what people want to buy across thousands of stores by category, working with all these suppliers, trying to find the items. So what I got lucky with is I worked in a store for a little while I was going to graduate school, and then I got into the buyer training program. So I come in, day one, they're like, you're a buyer for fishing tackle. Here it is. There was literally no training. There was a stack of papers on the desk. And one of those, by the way, stacks of paper was a Post-it note from Sam Walton. I didn't know it was Sam Walton, but it said, our price is too high on DuPont Trilene fishing line versus Kmart, fix it. So I take this yellow Post-it note to my boss. The very first day I moved into the home office, his name was Ray, and Ray's like, dude, how long have you had this? And I'm like, I just started today, and I just found this piece of paper. So they ran down to Sam Walton's office. They said, we fixed the Trilene fishing line. So I ended up in merchandising, in food, and other categories, and I just loved it. I loved the culture of the place, the challenge of the place. So it kept me engaged, and now I've had all these different jobs. Worked in Sam's, worked in International 2 different times, have been all over the world. I'm a kid from Arkansas, and Walmart has let me learn and see all these things.
So what would you say is the most important quality that has been helpful to you as a leader? Is it intelligence? Is it communication skills? Is it getting along with people? What do you think is the most important skill?
Constant improvement. The person I am today is different than the person I was a year ago, and a way different person than when I started.
Okay, now let's talk about diversity. Diversity is obviously a big issue. How is your workforce in terms of diversity and your leadership?
In the big numbers, it obviously looks like the United States. So we have a really good situation as it relates to gender diversity, but we are under-indexing at very top leadership ranks as it relates to people of color.
All right, how about people who have last names like Rubenstein? You have a lot of those? Not that many.
We have some.
Really? Okay, a few, okay. All right. Okay, I haven't met them, but I'm sure they're there. Okay.
Not going to really identify them for you
Okay,
right now.
Right, I know, okay. So today, when you're trying to run your company, Are you thinking about Sam Walton's principles? You're thinking about things in the future? You're worried about Amazon? What are the things that you really worry the most about that you've got to do to make the company grow?
Yeah, so back to changing from within. We had this business model, and it really worked, and it still works to a large extent, that leads you to specialization. So, you have an operations team, and you have a merchandising team, and a marketing team, and logisticians, and all these silos, and they all suboptimize. And in today's world, especially with digital being what it is, you've got to solve problems for the customer and the associate and work backwards across silos. So we're learning how to work in an agile fashion. We're learning how to install product management into the company so that we're faster, more effective, and we're more productive. That change from within is one of the big challenges. It will result in better results. And let's pretend that I was done today. If I wanted to look back on the two things that I needed to have done most, beyond just the running of the things that have already started, one of them is positioning the company for the future, particularly as it relates to what businesses we're in and which ones we're not, and being able to run them in a digital fashion. And then even more importantly than that, it's about culture. Have we shaped the culture, created the environment where people are lifelong learners, curious? Sam was a change agent extraordinaire. But as you get big, you can lose that. We need 2.3 million change agents if we can get them. And so that's the other big part that I'm focused on.
So your stock is traded at, what kind of multiple do you trade at? PE multiple?
25.
25. So I guess Amazon trades at around 225, so something like that. So have you had any, Amazon envy over that multiple they trade at, or?
It'd be pointless. Right. I get the question a lot. Do you think it's fair? Do you think, this or that's fair? We don't have time to worry about that. We got to go. We got to go as it relates to customers, digital, and get to where we need to be.
Most publicly traded companies are more or less run by the board in terms of leadership and obviously the management. But you have a family that owns a very large stake. And what stake does the Walton family still own?
About half.
About half. So if somebody in the Walton family calls you up, do you take their call right away? Or you do?
Yeah, yes.
They do. And do they? Do you get a lot of those calls, or they call a lot, or they basically leave you alone?
Yeah, so the way it works is it's a public company with an independent board, and we've got 3 family members currently on the board of 12, and it feels like a public company 100%. Every once in a while, we have a choice to make, like the wage investment that we made when we went from under 8 to 9 and 10, and we announced what the 10 was going to cost. We lost $21 billion in market cap in a day.
And did the CEO get blamed for that?
I took a little heat over it. But it wouldn't have happened if it weren't for a board and a Walton family that were willing to let us have some short-term pain for a longer-term benefit and do something we knew was right and that we wanted to do. So there's a little bit of a blend there that gives you that long-term opportunity. But whether you're a Walton family member or an independent board member or a shareholder, they all expect a return. Everybody wants sales and earnings over time. The time horizon can differ depending on who you are.
Okay. And you pay a dividend? Or?
We do.
So the dividend is what the family lives off if they're not selling the stock, right? But they haven't been selling much stock over the years, the family?
Yeah, they've sold some to fund charitable efforts. And as we do share buyback, they want to maintain their ownership percentage, so they sell related to that too.
Okay, so you're very young to be the CEO of a company as big as this. You're in your early 50s. So you could do this for another 20 years? 15?
This is hard.
I know, but, well, you mean the interview or the job?
The interview's fun.
Okay, the job's tough. Okay.
When I heard it was you, I knew it would be, so I was ready for that.
All right, so to be very serious, you could do this for another 10 years before you might burn out or something like that. But Sam Walton did it till, your predecessors.
He was the founder.
The other predecessors, they retired in their early 60s?
David and Lee did it for about 10.
Okay, so if you...
I'm 5 in.
All right, so if you did it for 10 total or 15 total, would you ever want to go in the government of the United States and be a cabinet officer? You'd never want to run for governor of Arkansas, senator, nothing like that?
I don't think so. Not qualified.
Well, that's not a standard anymore. Really. I wouldn't worry about that. I wouldn't worry about it. Okay. So what would you want to do next? I mean, philanthropic things, what would you want to do?
I don't know. I have no thought about that. I've got a full-time, seriously,
So let me
full-time
ask you
job.
about, when I go into Walmart, and I admit I've gone from time to time, here's the thing I always wonder about Walmart. They have, let's say, a lot of displays of things, and it's all neat and so forth, but you see some things have been picked over, people push them aside, and whatever happens to those things, do you kind of straighten them out, or you sell them on discount somewhere? Because they look like they've been picked up, maybe somebody tried on the clothes, they look like they've been, you know, a little used. Do you ever have that problem? Is that a big amount of merchandise that's kind of not neatly set there?
Yeah, well, if it's still in good shape quality-wise, and we put it back, we fix it. We call it zoning. It's a bit of zone defense to zone the area, clean it up, get it ready for sale. We used to do that after we closed, but now we're open 24 hours, so we have to do it as things go.
You don't have any discount stores. You don't have a Walmart discount store that sells second tier.
We have a clearance aisle I'll take you to sometime if you want to see it.
All right, and what percentage of people go there pay cash, and what percentage use credit cards?
I think we're still about, Dan, 20% cash, believe it or not. We still, so if you asked a related question like, what's the demographic of the Walmart customer in the U.S., and you took the bell curve of basically any metric, income level, age, whatever you want to take, we basically look like that U.S. bell curve.
Okay.
There's a little bit of over-indexing towards lower income and under-indexing at the very high end of high income, but it's basically the U.S. So in that mix, we've got a lot of people who are living paycheck to paycheck, 2-week period to 2-week period, and you can see it behaviorally, and to them, pennies matter. Some of them don't have credit cards, and they use cash to pay, and you can see things like we sell a lot of gasoline. And gas at this time a year ago was $2.30 a gallon. Today it's a little north of $2.90. So it may not sound like a big number to most of us, but behaviorally, we already see customers that are coming to the pumps more frequently but putting in a partial tank because they don't have enough cash to put in a whole tank of gas.
Okay. So when I go to Walmart, one time I went and I gave them a $100 bill to buy something, and they have a technique, they look it up in the light, whether it's fake or not. Is that a standard procedure? How do you know whether a $100 bill is fake or not? Is that a way you do it at Walmart, or
You're beyond my level of expertise on that
okay.
subject.
So what is the greatest pleasure of being the CEO of Walmart?
It's the stories about the people that we meet. So I'll go out into a store and I'll meet somebody. One of the people I've been talking about lately is from Pico Rivera, California. Her name is Crystal Rivas. And Crystal is a single parent, had a child at a young age, didn't have a job, came to Walmart, got a job as a cashier. And she applied herself. She's really smart. She worked hard. She became a department manager, which really increased her wage. She then ran several different departments, and then she got promoted to be an academy facilitator. So now she's got a higher wage rate, better standard of living. She and her daughter are in good shape, and she's teaching other people through the academy and lifting them up. She's awesome. Well, everywhere I go, I can find somebody like that who is making a difference, and that's the best part. Whenever I'm done, I'm going to look back, and that's going to be my favorite.
So if I had some money to invest, and I wanted to invest in a stock, a publicly traded stock, what would be a good reason why I would want to buy Walmart stock?
Because of what we're doing to change the company. You believe in the omni-channel future, so we are running good stores, we're building an e-commerce business, and we're learning how to connect them both digitally. So as the company changes, we're finding we can solve problems like when you go to the pharmacy today, or you go to get tires on your car, or you're getting a cake for someone's birthday. Right now there's an analog experience when you come up to that area and somebody's going to say, "What's your name, David?" over and over again. We are changing that as we speak, and it's now a digital experience where when you walk up, we know who you are. We don't have to ask you the same questions. Everything goes faster. And if you believe in the omni-channel future, which is why Amazon bought Whole Foods and why Alibaba's investing in brick and mortar in China, the seamless aspect of shopping is going to result in people who have an omni-channel capability win. So that's why you'd buy Walmart stock.
Well, thank you very much for your insights. And so running a company like that when you've got a family that owns half, it's not easy, and you've done a great job. And next time I go to Walmart, can I say that I know you, and would that help anyway?
It won't help in any way, but thanks.
Okay, so now we're bringing to the stage David Brancaccio with a gentleman who's building a company that lets you have access to capital, which is a very interesting story, and Doug will return in several minutes. So thank you, David.
Thank you. All right, there are at least 410 people here. That's what this house holds. If it were a representative sample of America, which it is not, serious point, 123 of us could not easily pay a $400 emergency expense. $400. That's you hit a pothole and you needed 2 new tires. That's an alternator or a starter. That's kid got a cut on her calf and needed stitches at the local clinic. 125, it's like this section of people, if you want to visualize that, are that economically insecure. One approach to this, economic and financial inclusion, which brings us to our guest here, Dan Schulman, who's CEO of the instant payment service PayPal, who's done a lot of thinking about this idea. What is financial inclusion the way you see it, Dan?
First of all, if everybody closes their eyes, you'll think we're on radio. So I interviewed with David earlier this morning, and it was great. It was a thrill.
A good time.
Yep.
It's on the air tomorrow.
Yep. Oh, great. The whole idea of financial inclusion is that today, believe it or not, there are 1.7 billion people in the world that live outside the financial system. Here in the United States alone, over 70 million adults don't have a bank account or use shadow banking in some way, shape, or form. Those 70 million adults spend $170 billion on interest rates and fees to do basic consumer transactions. By the way, that's the same amount that they spend on food. And that's a little ridiculous if you think about it. In today's environment, managing and moving money should be a right for every citizen. It shouldn't just be a privilege for the affluent. And technology can make a big change in that. We ought to be able to do those same transactions more rapidly, with more comprehension, more security, and importantly, much less expensively. In fact, with technology, you can do some of those same basic transactions at maybe 50 to 80% less cost. So think about that, $170 billion being spent today unnecessarily. If we could return only 10 to 20% of that, that's tens of billions of dollars here in the United States alone that we could return back. And to me, that's how you imagine, not financial inclusion, which is like just do you have a bank account or not, but really how do we imagine or reimagine financial health in this country and around the world. And that's really the mission of PayPal. It's what we're focused on, and it is a big issue, a big problem, and especially in today's world, it's especially acute.
If you think about it, right, I think you've said this before. If you're wealthy, you get a free bank account, and you get really low interest rates. And if you're struggling, you get the other.
Yeah, it's ironic. The people who most need help are the ones who pay the most for this. And so it's upside down from my perspective. I mean, I think you think about small businesses, which are really the economic engine of growth here in the United States. Over 55 million Americans are employed by small businesses. Most new employment comes from small businesses. They have a very hard time raising capital. In fact, there are many what we call banking deserts in the country right now. And all those banking deserts happen in neighborhoods where, not surprisingly, the income level of that is below the national median. And so banks need a certain amount of interest to afford a branch, and if those are less affluent communities, they withdraw. And so, to me, the ability to use technology to afford those small businesses loans and working capital, we do that. We are probably the 5th largest lender of capital to small businesses in the United States. We've lent over $5 billion to small businesses in the last couple of years. These are two interesting facts. 25% of those $5 billion are to the 3% of counties in the US where 10 or more banks have closed branches. So, and we, by the way, we never even look at a FICO score for that. We use data and information to be able to extend those loans to those small businesses. And where we lend money to a small business, on average, their sales go up 22% versus a control rate of 1%.
All right, now, Dan, this is really interesting. There's another participant here at Aspen who's on my show quite a bit, Jose Quinones. He's with Mission Asset Fund in San Francisco, a nonprofit. He won the MacArthur. And he works with new immigrant customers in San Francisco. And he works to figure out what are traditional and existing systems within the immigrant communities that we can draw on so that we can connect them with the regular financial system in the United States in a way that they're not preyed upon. And some of this is understanding who's good for it and who's not. And you have your own system.
Yeah, we do. We've done some testing and some modeling where we think that our data and our algorithms are maybe 30% more accurate than traditional FICO scores. And what does that mean? What that means is that we can lend to consumers or small businesses and go down 30% lower in the population and lend at the same risk levels, which means that we can afford, or those segments of the population can now have access to credit, to services that they wouldn't have been able to have done before. The interesting thing is that most people who run a deficit in their cash flows, it's not that their expenses are greater than their revenues. In fact, typically their revenues are greater than their expenses, but their cash flows are uneven. And so they need help at certain times. In fact, one of the things that Doug didn't mention, but he's doing at Walmart right now with their associates, which I think is incredibly novel and very progressive, is instead of how you pay employees every 2 weeks, but in that 2 weeks, you could have a problem and not have access to your money and then have to go to a payday lender and have exorbitant interest rates, sometimes as high as 100, 200, 300%. He allows them to take an advance on the money that they've already earned to take that. So the time value of money can be thought of differently through technology. And I think that's what we want to try and do. Like for a lot of immigrants coming over to the United States, and we can talk about that later, but I'm a strong believer in global free trade and immigrants coming in to our country. But a lot come here seeking opportunity, and they have families abroad. And we can, and they send international remittances to their families, and they wait in line for like 30, 45 minutes, and then on average, 8 to 10% of that remittance of their hard-earned money that they send to family members in Mexico or in other countries where they came from, they take 10% from it and their family members wait. We can do that same transaction almost instantaneously at anywhere between half to 60% less cost than traditional means. And to me, every dollar, and Doug mentioned this, it may not seem like a lot to a lot of people here in this audience, but for those who are living on the margin, who have less than $400 in savings, by the way, the other stat that's amazing to me is 75% of all Americans struggle to make ends meet at the end of the month. Think about that. So we are really we are not living in a time where people feel comfortable with their financial health. And if we can save 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50% of the fees that they're paying right now, imagine that impact we can have, not just on immigrant communities, but in this general, what I call sort of the new middle class of the United States.
We've been talking a little bit abstractly about these important issues, but you've done the deep dive yourself. And we've all, I guess, read Henry V, Shakespeare. What does Prince Hal do? He goes undercover, right?
What does
Hangs out
Prince
with the
Hal
common
do?
soldiers to find out what's really going on. So you've done this, right? You've gone out in the real world to experience, like when you said the statistic about waiting online at a place to transfer money, you've done that?
Yeah, I think if you're going to stand for something as a company, and the mission of PayPal is, we call it democratizing financial services, and that just basically means that we just think that these basic consumer financial transactions should be a right that everyone can do. And right now, they're really more a privilege for the affluent. And to your point, the world's really upside down on that. The poorer people in the country are charged, where the more wealthy are not charged for those transactions. And there are so many stats that intellectually you can understand. Intellectually, you get it. The real issue, though, that I believe is that if you really want to be passionate about a vision and a mission, you have to understand those issues intellectually, and you have to understand them with your heart, emotionally. And so what I actually now require at PayPal, and what I've done personally a couple of times, is put yourselves in the shoes of those who are underserved. And I'm not saying that any of you should do it, but it would be an interesting experiment if you did. Go and try and live life for a day or two without a bank account, without a credit card, without checks. Go and cash a check. Stand in line for 30 to 45 minutes. And by the way, you'll find where you're cashing a check, the conversations around you are, did you hear that Joe got mugged the other day outside the store? Because that's where money is, and there's more violent crime that occurs in those cash checking locations. So every time I did this, I would stand in line 30 to 45 minutes. Sometimes I'd get up to the cashier window, and the check I had would say, pay to the order of Dan Schulman, and my driver's license says Daniel Schulman on it. And they would decline to cash the check. But what they would say to me is, and I did this in New York, if you go 2 blocks away and up to the 3rd floor to apartment 107, they will cash that check for you, but it'll be like 15%. And I was like, well, no, thank you. I'm not going to go do that. But it's interesting to see. And then, by the way, when you get the cash and you want to pay a bill, you can't pay your bills by cash, right? You can't. So you have to go stand in line again, get a money order. That money order can cost $11 to pay your cable bill. And so now all of a sudden you're having to constantly change currency back and forth. Every time you do it, you stand in line, and every time you do it, they take a percentage of that transfer. And so managing and moving money, if you're outside the financial system, is practically a part-time job. It is not just expensive, but it is hours that consume you. We did a study that in Mexico, waiting for international remittances, on average, a typical Mexican citizen waits 15 days of their life just waiting to get international remittances. So it's incredible how much time and effort
You mentioned very quickly, though, but you ask your employees to do the same?
Yep, I do.
So they each have this experience in different ways.
Yep, we have a whole program around it. Again, I think once you do it, it's hard not to become passionate about the difference that we can make.
Do you draw a line between contemporary politics in America and the polarization you're seeing and maybe some of these issues of economic insecurity?
I do. My favorite quote on democracy is that democracy needs to be more than 2 wolves and a lamb voting on what to have for dinner. So think about that. So what that means, to me at least, is that in order for us to have a thriving democracy, we need to rise above our own self-interest, right? You need to think about the whole being greater than your individual. But how can we expect people to think above their own self-interests when every single month they're struggling to make ends meet, when they feel like the system has let them down? In many ways it has. And it isn't, I don't think that they're voting for something. I think they're voting against the system. I think they're frustrated, they're angry, they're worried about whether their kids will have a better life than they did. And I think you see that in the rise of nationalism, protection around jobs. And I think financial health is sort of the bottom rung of Maslow's need hierarchy. And I do believe that, and I said this in a big speech at the big financial services industry conference called Money 2020. I said that financial health ought to be the moonshot for our industry in financial services, that we have a moral obligation to extend the new tools and the new technology to people who are underserved today, because it will make a real difference in our world, and we can do it now. That's the thing that both excites me and frustrates me at the same time, is that we have the capability to do it, but it's difficult. There are a number of constituencies that need to come together, and Doug and I have talked about this, and others have. Like, how can we come together to best serve those who traditionally don't have a voice and are underserved today?
You and Doug can do this, but I mean, policy has to play a role. I mean, you can improve, I want to say at the margins, you can improve some of this significantly, but you would hope it would be connected to policy as well.
Yeah. So PayPal operates in some 200 countries, territories around the world. We have about 250 million people on our platform. And so I travel all around the world, and I meet with regulators and top government officials in every country, and including here in the U.S. A lot of conversations. Here's what I find. Almost every single government and every single regulator comes together around how do we provide better opportunity for our citizens. They want to go and do that. Now, the problem is technology is moving faster than a lot of regulations can keep up with. And you think about data and algorithms and a number of other things that we use to provide services. It's very difficult to go and do that, and for regulators who have been around for a long time to necessarily understand it. But the concept of driving financial health, they're very, very passionate about. But I think not only is the financial services industry going to change more in the next 5 or 10 years than it has in the last 25 or 50 years, but I think there are 3 things happening in our economy and our world today that are going to make more change and maybe impact every job around the world, in that you've got quantum computing coming, you've got the rise of general artificial intelligence, where it'll be hard to tell the difference between a human and a machine, and then you have an explosion of data that's feeding those 2 meta trends, and those all come together in the next 10 to 15 years. And I think it is absolutely incumbent upon the private and the public and the NGOs and the nonprofit sectors, academia, to come together and think about these issues, and how can we create an ethics around the use of technology that allows access to the digital economy and anticipates all of these changes that are coming, because they're coming. And we need to really spend a lot of time.
You mean like a Hippocratic oath, so that we want to look out for not doing harm with all this, like that?
That might be a good way to start.
I've asked a lot of my questions in the domestic context, but globally, these issues are even a deeper issue. The issue of simply the unbanked. It's less than 10% in the United States that are formally unbanked. It doesn't mean that way more, as we've discussed, are at in the financial shadows or, or beyond. But globally, it's a big issue, and PayPal plays a role.
Yeah, as I mentioned, 1.7 billion people in the globe outside the financial services industry. Doug mentioned 20% of Walmart's transactions are in cash. But around the world, believe it or not, 85% of all transactions are still cash. 85%. So think about all the corruption and all of what we call leakage in the system that occurs when governments try to give benefits to recipients. India was a huge issue. You have over 1 billion people in the Indian population, many of them desperately in need of these benefits, and you could have as much as 20% leakage between the government issuing the benefit and the recipient finally receiving it. And so countries like India, are leapfrogging from what you might consider all cash to trying to move to all digital. And 5 years ago, there is no way I would have imagined that India probably has 95% of their transactions in cash, could be a country that in the next 5 to 10 years has the majority of their transactions happening digitally. They've created a full biometric ID system called Aadhaar. They've created multiple protocols for doing the digital transmission of money called UPI. They've put into place bank accounts that are no fee, that government benefits go directly into. And so I think they are trying to leapfrog. China, another great example of digital payments. 95% of all Chinese have a smartphone, and the vast majority of transactions happen through digital today in China. In fact, the US, in my opinion, is a developing country in terms of digital payments.
So you probably saw this, Dan. In India, big story for us in the last year is that the government took the very popular 100 rupee note out of circulation because all the shadow economy stuff was going on in cash, money laundering, but also tax avoidance and all this stuff. So they take that note and you have to swap it with the new stuff. What happened was two things. One is especially relevant to the conversation, but the first thing that happened is it was a failure because corrupt bank managers were willing to swap the new note for the old note, which was not what the plan was. But when we spoke to the Indian government, they said, look, but something else marvelous did happen. Maybe an unintended consequence or an intended consequence. The process of taking that 100 rupee note out of circulation meant that a lot of folks went to modern electronic ways of dealing with their resources, which also means that has a tax effect for the Indian government, which has a lot of social services to pay for. They went electronic.
Yeah, and that experiment is still, the jury is still out, but I have to say, I met with there are only 5 people in the government that actually knew about that whole plan and planned the whole thing out. And I met with one of them in a hotel room because we couldn't be seen in public together. And I have to say they're quite sophisticated and quite serious about making this move into the digital economy. And I think if they can do it, now there's some downsides to it, but if they can do it, it could unleash tremendous benefits in the Indian economy.
Well, what's the downside? What are you worried about?
Yeah. So some people are worried about privacy issues. I think privacy is a big issue that a lot of people struggle with. The question really, and because you have a biometric identification, if you think about what governments around the world and regulators around the world are trying to do, is they're really trying to prevent money laundering from happening, money transmission to bad groups, bad guys out there, financial crimes. And so I think knowing your customer, what we call KYC, KYA, knowing your account, is essential to providing a financial system that works and allows people with good transactions to make those and bad actors not to make them.
So you help us move money around. You lend a lot of money to especially small businesses. Are you becoming a bank, Dan?
So we are a bank in Europe, but we're not trying to become a bank. That is not, when we sit around at PayPal headquarters, we don't go, "Woo, we want to be a bank." That's not what our DNA is. I think what we really want to think about is how can we think about the explosion of mobile connectivity right now. There's going to be something close to 4 billion smartphones in the world in the next 3 years. A smartphone in India today costs less than $25. And so you're going to have all the power of a bank branch in the palm of your hand going forward. You've got software platforms where the incremental cost to service a customer approaches zero on that. And how do you reimagine basic consumer financial transactions in a world of mobile and software? And then what we do is we think about segments of the market. For the underserved, we want to think about how can we disruptively serve them in a way that is low cost and easily comprehensible for those segments. And for the more affluent, how do we team up with banks, with financial networks to provide the best of our platform and the best of their services to create a value proposition that neither of us could do alone? I think the other thing, and Doug mentioned this, but I don't think any of us should underestimate the change that mobile will have on retail. Mobile, as Doug said, is fundamentally blurring the distinction between online and offline. If you order ahead, or say you order an Uber today, there's no payment in there. You order it online, you get into a car, you walk out. Was that an online transaction or an offline transaction? It was both. It was just commerce happening. And I think that combination and that ability now for retailers to more intimately understand their customers and provide better services and capabilities because they have mobile connectivity with them is going to change the way that retail is done. Digital payments will be an enabling element of that going forward.
Now we get just a couple moments left. I got to ask you, does the room know what Venmo is? Yeah, right? It's like social media meets banking, and you can tell what your friends are buying, but most importantly, you can split the cab fare easily. He owns Venmo. It's PayPal. We're talking about social good and the work that you do. I can see the social good in Venmo, that it helps get rid of cheapskates who mooch off the rest of us. All right, that's the social good. Here's the cost, Dan. What about the fact that Venmo can turn your buddies into petty jerks who are nickel and diming you? That can happen.
Yeah, there have been petty jerks for a long time.
It didn't take Venmo to make the petty jerk?
Venmo, I don't think Venmo created those.
Why did you buy that thing anyway?
Yeah. So Venmo, for those of you who don't know it, and I look out in the audience, and normally I can tell exactly who uses Venmo and who doesn't, because it's basically, and we call it inside PayPal, there's a Venmo line, and that's at about age 30. Now, those of you who do know it are typically the banker for that under 30-year-old.
Exactly.
That's why you know it. But you're not the user of it, you're just the banker of them. So on Venmo, which basically is the way that the millennial generation manages and moves money today, every single one of their transactions, like 94% of them, are tagged with an emoji or a comment on it. And they share that with their friends, okay? And so Venmo users open their app almost every single day to see what their friends are actually doing. Like I open it to see who my daughter is dating, you know, who she's going out with. I know all of you do the same thing. But basically, this ability to share is not really the downside of Venmo. It is the upside of Venmo. It is what the millennial generation is all about, splitting and sharing and, sharing that with their friends' network. And it's been something that has been growing leaps and bounds for us, and we're very excited about it.
All right, there are only 3 rules in my line of work, which is I have to work very hard to get my facts straight. I can't say any cucko words on the air, and I have to end on time. We're exactly on time. Dan Schulman, PayPal.
Yeah.
I'm going to invite Rebecca Blumenstein and Doug McMillon back to the stage. Can I just ask you all, how many of you in the audience run or are at the top of a company? Run or are at the top executive ranks of a company? Okay, interesting. Just want to know who we're talking to. Okay, here you go. Let's see. This is yours. Would you like to-
Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here, and thank you both for joining. I'm excited to talk about the changing role of companies and CEOs and leadership. And I have to say, quite sadly, Doug and I were just sitting in the back there, and you may have noticed on your phones that there's been a shooting in a newsroom in Maryland, and there appear to be a number of fatalities. So this is something that will, I guess, bring our sorry to share bad news, but in a way it brings to some sharp relief, I think, the topic today, which is CEOs playing a greater role on social issues and on issues far beyond the bottom line. So I guess, Doug, why don't we start with you? At Walmart, you have taken a stance on Charlottesville, on the Paris Accord, and on guns. Is this something that at some level is surprising to you?
Yes. Didn't go to school for that, and none of us probably expected, as we were thinking about business and our careers, that we would be in those situations. Sorry, better? I think when you are in an organization or part of a team and you have values, there are times when things happen that touch those values, and you have a leadership opportunity to step up and add a positive voice, hopefully, to the conversation. We try to be thoughtful about when we do it and how we do it.
Dan, how about for you?
Well, like Doug, I mean, none of us asked to be thrust into this position, into positions of defining what's free speech and what's hate speech. But if you're a major consumer company, both of us are, there's no way to avoid these cultural wars that go on. And the way that I think about it is, as companies, we each have missions that we try to espouse. So our mission at PayPal, as I mentioned, is democratizing financial services. And that's for all citizens. So it's expansive and it's inclusive. And so your values then follow what your mission is. And so for us, diversity and inclusion is like value number 1 for us. We have others, but that's value number 1 for us. And so when something comes up in the political realm or elsewhere in society, we then, I think, have a moral obligation as leaders to stand up for those values. Like, those values should not be something that are up on a wall, but we don't act on, right? And so I think if we don't act on them, then they're nothing. But if we do act on them, then they're real values. And what we say inside is that these should not be political decisions. These should be values-based decisions. It makes it a little easier to figure out what to get involved in, but they should be values-based decisions based on who you are as a company. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody in the company will agree on it. Doug's got millions of people in his company. I've got tens of thousands of people at PayPal. Not everybody thinks and feels the same way, nor should they. And part of our strength is in that diversity. But the decisions we make as a company are based on our values, and we'll do that publicly.
I want to delve a little more deeply into the reasons behind this shift. We are, as a nation, very polarized at the moment politically, but it feels that employees, your employees, you mentioned mission, are in some senses demanding that you take positions. Is that true?
Yes, but as Dan said, they don't all agree. Right. So as it relates to values, one of our core values is respect for the individual, which if you're going to espouse that and try to shape a culture to have behaviors that align to that value, when a moment like that happens, you have to speak up. So take Charlottesville. Things moved quickly that day. The event happened. The president responded the way that he did. There were several different groups of people that were advising the president as part of a council or forum. I was on one of those forums. Ken Frazier from Merck stepped off of one of the forums, so our phone started ringing with members of the media saying, how about you, what are you going to do? So then the clock starts ticking, news cycles going, do you respond or not respond? So we're trying to think through, all right, personally, that wasn't handled well. A value of the company is respect for the individual. I would like to say something about it. Then the question becomes, do you stay engaged or not? So that's a bit related, but also a separate decision. So we think through that, we respond, and the associate feedback was mixed. And some people said, thank you for speaking up. It's important to stand for our values. And other people said, stay out of politics. You don't speak for me.
What about your customers? Were they upset? And when you, talking more broadly, when you took Confederate symbols off your websites and you've taken some measures on guns, you have to be doing a calculus in terms of, is this going to hurt my bottom line?
We do. There's no equation or algorithm that I know of for most of these things. If you find one, let me know. On these decisions that we've made so far, it has generally been more positive than negative. But on the gun issue, there was quite a bit of negative just because we made a policy change related to guns that made it more restrictive. Our decision was to layer on top of some other things that we were doing to now require people to be 21 years of age to buy a gun. I do want to explain, we don't sell handguns except in Alaska, and they need them there for other reasons. We don't sell modern sporting rifles or AR-15s, automatic type weapons. We sell shotguns and things that we're trying to serve hunters with and people who shoot sporting clays. We also, if you don't get a response from the NICS system in 24 hours, you can sell a gun. We don't until we get a response back from the government to know that that gun has been approved. We also do a good job digitally with compliance to make sure we have all the information as we sell a gun. And now we took this additional step of moving to 21. So there was a backlash related to that, and we hear about it directly, but you know that going into it. And all in all, we're trying to make balanced decisions and do what's right. And sometimes that may cause some short-term pain.
Dan, is it your employees who are pushing you?
I don't know if it was so much employees pushing us. We had a couple of hard decisions we had to make. I mean, the most public of them was when we withdrew from North Carolina around House Bill 2. We had just announced with the governor of North Carolina that we were going to open a 400-person operations center in Charlotte. A week later, without us knowing about it, North Carolina passed HB 2, House Bill 2, which in our reading of it allowed for the potential discrimination against somebody for their sexual identity or sexual orientation. And this, really is against all the values of PayPal. And I was in my office. I happened to be seeing the governor on my computer talking about, people are talking that this is bad, but nobody's doing anything. And, I walked down the hall to our head of corporate affairs, and I said, I want us out of North Carolina within a week. And I had no idea the hubbub that was going to cause, but I really felt like it was anathema to our values as a company, and that we couldn't open an operations center where there was room for discrimination. And it was a very, and I had a ton of personal death threats as a result of it, which, I told my mom about them. She was like, oh, my. And that's a thing. Never tell your mom about death threats. It's a terrible thing to do. But my feeling on that was not a red issue or a blue issue. That was a red, white, and blue issue. That was an American values, which is like, we should not have any discrimination of any kind for any reason in our country. Plain and simple. And so, but it shouldn't be like that, dramatic, really. I mean, that's like basic American values from my perspective. And so pulling out, we had some people inside the company who felt like, wait a minute, what about your customers? And we had some customer complaints, but we had so much affirmation as well. And so we actually didn't do the calculus because, as Doug said, I don't know the algorithm either. Like when you take stands for your values, whether that is more business or less business. What I do know is that's who we are as a company, and I don't believe that there is some dichotomy or false duality between profit and purpose. I think if you're a purpose-driven company, if you really want to be a customer champion, you should be able to have that and also deliver for your shareholders. And for me, that was an easy decision, a tough one in terms of consequences and public exposure, but an easy decision to make.
You both have been in business for a long time. Has this been a shift that's been taking place gradually? It used to be, I think, probably 5 years ago that taking a stance on a social issue would have been almost unheard of for Walmart and PayPal. That's not the case today. And are you seeing that institutional investors, are they also pushing you to do this? I was really struck by, the investors who want Apple now to push limits on phone use. And we're hearing rumblings of a lot of discussions among investors pushing you as well.
It feels to me like it's intensifying. And, as other institutions leave gaps, they have to be filled somewhere, and so the pressure flows somewhere else, and it feels like that's happening to business. I also think that you can, if you're a systems thinker, create a design in your business that benefits multiple stakeholders. And that's going to lead us into environmental sustainability, social sustainability. It's going to lead to social issues more often. And, we have talented people who help us think about these things. We're up for it. We won't get them all right. We need to get most of them right if we can't get all of them right, but it's just a reality of the situation. Now, at Walmart, we've been involved in stuff for a long time because we're such a part of the community and things happen. My first experience with it was as a toy merchant. I had a number of departments. This is back to almost 2000, and we had a wrestling action figure, WWF toy action figure, get shipped into our stores that had a male wrestler that had ripped the head off of a woman as part of his act in wrestling. And it was in an assortment of toys, and the buyer never saw it, but the supplier shipped it in that assortment. The buyer is terrified of this, walks into my office and says, what do I do? We looked at each other and said, that's easy, get it out of the store. Recall it immediately, we don't want to sell that. Let's have a conversation with the supplier about that. Never happening again. CNN pops a poll up on the website, not something that I would have anticipated at the time. And for hours, I don't know, 3/4 of the day, there's a updating poll. Did Walmart do the right thing pulling this action figure and a picture of it? And I think it was more than 100,000 people voted. What do you think the split was? 50-50. So that was my moment where I was like, what? The world doesn't agree with me on this? How can that be? So you know at that moment you're in trouble. Because if you can't get people to agree on that, so you still have to do what you think's right. Yeah. And today it's just in the job, it's higher stakes, and the world's changed, so it's more newsworthy.
Just a quick follow-up. You made a statement about the Paris Accords, and Walmart has very ambitious environmental goals. The skeptic in me is like, well, why are you doing that? Like, why, you probably, your toys use a lot of plastic. There's lots of impact to the environment, things you sell. Why as a company are you taking a stance?
Yeah, it's a long story, but I'll try to tell you briefly. We when we were very young, were focused on two stakeholder groups. We were focused on customers and associates. And Sam would say, if you take care of those two, everything else works out, investors will be fine, et cetera. So then you get big and the rules change. We didn't get the memo. For a period of time, we were still very focused on those stakeholder groups. We'd been taught to ignore media because media was generally in the beginning saying good things, and you don't want to read your own press clippings, so you're kind of wired to ignore those voices. When they become negative, you're still ignoring them. And then you say, well, they just don't know us, we're good people, blah, blah, blah. So we go through that period of criticism, which really hurts our feelings, and then Katrina happens, and when Hurricane Katrina happened, we stepped forward and did a lot of extraordinary things to help, and the world looked back, the country looked back and said, we liked that. We felt good about that, and it led to an opening and a conversation with NGOs, thought leaders, environmental thought leaders, and we began to understand, wait, if we can serve all of these stakeholders, we can sell our corrugate rather than having somebody haul it off, and we'll make money doing that. We can put better lighting into our stores, and yes, the capital is more up front, but we'll get a better return on investment over a 10-year horizon. We should be doing things with renewable energy. We can eliminate some of that packaging, and we started spending time with environmentalists and others, Paul Hawken, Jib Ellison, other CI, WWF, and we got educated. And so now we've got a systems point of view, shared value approach, and it helps us recruit talent. I think it will help over time with our reputation, although most of the time people say to me, you're doing this, like we have Project Gigaton. We're going to take a gigaton of carbon out of our system by 2030. 400 suppliers over 30 countries have signed up to help us do that. And people will say stuff like, you should tell somebody. And we're like, we do, and nobody writes about it. Maybe you can help with that. But why go to work when you go home and talk to your kids and you say, why do I do what I do? I don't get excited about saying we sold one more banana. I get excited about saying we're making a positive difference for the people that work for the company and for everybody else.
I think that actually is a great point. Look, there's one source of competitive advantage that every company has, and it's the people that work there. That's it. If you get the best people, you will do very well in the marketplace. The best people always make the biggest difference. And the best people actually want to work at a company that's making a difference, that stands for something and has a purpose behind it. And I think that's why these values questions are so important and why standing up for them are so important. I mean, I think we now as leaders, I think Doug said this well, where you see we can't rely on government to solve all the problems of the world. That's obvious right now. We need to take stands on issues that matter. And I don't think we're being activist CEOs like everybody sort of titles us as that. Just think we're being responsible citizens that happen to run big companies, but I think we're being responsible citizens. And I think there has to be a combination of companies stepping up to do the right thing right now and not abdicating that responsibility.
I want to open it up to questions in one moment, but just before that, should we give credit? I know everyone kind of dumps on millennials a bit, but it feels that you both mentioned mission in your workforces, and you're in Bentonville, you've acquired Jet, you're trying to get the best software engineers, both of you. It's very competitive climate out there. Should we give credit to young people for caring about these issues more than people in my generation did?
Yeah, yeah, we should.
So they're the ones who are driving, in a sense, it makes sense for you competitively as well because you've got to compete for talent.
I think that's true. I met with a group of our interns yesterday, and it's definitely true for that large group of people. But it's also true that when we started changing, we had people from all over the company that you didn't know were so enlightened and engaged and wanted to take on sustainability because we hadn't had it in the conversation. And once the conversation started, they were coming to us saying, "Put me in, coach. How can I help?" And they were of all ages. They all looked different, but we gave them a platform. So it's not just millennials. There are all kinds of people who want to do good work.
I agree. I mean, we have probably 2/3 of our workforce that are millennials. It's pretty young. But we have something like 94% of PayPal population that are proud to work at PayPal. And that's, I think, because we are really trying to actively make a difference and have values that we not just stand for, but act upon. I do remember when the Immigration Act happened first, we had 8 people at PayPal affected by that, that might have had to have been deported home. And, you know, I was on CNN denouncing that, and I was at an all-employee meeting, and somebody asked, "Why did you do that? There are 8 people that were affected." And I said, "Well, you probably would have felt different if you were one of those 8 people." And, you know, to me, it's a slippery slope, and I think everybody can relate to that. It's not just millennials, but millennials have a very idealistic sense about it, and, you know, I hope that continues.
You've all been very patient throughout the session, and I understand you haven't had a chance to ask questions. So are there any out?
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, hi. Stand up. Okay. Yeah, hi. For either one of you, how do you go cross borders with your enlightened human resource initiatives?
We have a common culture, a common set of values, and teams that cross it. So we're in 28 countries. We basically run it in about 12 different businesses, but we're together all the time. And things, because of digital and because of communication, because of travel, things are really connected these days. People, as I travel, they know what's going on. The questions I get are pretty common from country to country. It's really, the answers I've given are not U.S. answers.
It's not always easy. There are different cultural values in different countries. It's not always easy to go and do. But our values are our values across the company. And what we really try to do is provide at least a safe haven within our work space for those values to exist. But, you know, it's a big world out there, and a lot of people feel differently about different issues that we may hold very important to us. And, you know, it's not as easy as that. I totally agree with Doug that we're a much more connected world than people give credit for. But there are cultural differences. You need to have respect for it, but not give up on your values as a company as a result of it.
Any other questions? The one right on the. Can you pass? Back there, sorry.
Hi, thank you for a terrific panel. I have a million questions, but I'll limit to one. You articulately explained PayPal's mission is democratizing financial access inclusion. How are you doing that? Because if I'm not mistaken, don't you still need a bank account and a credit card in order to use most of PayPal's services?
You don't. You can actually put cash right onto the platform. In fact, you can do that through different merchant locations. You can get a P2P payment right onto the platform and then use it off of the platform. But the way that we're thinking about it is providing a suite of services to consumers and to businesses that allow them to both manage their money and move their money in a friction-free way. And so, for instance, we do international remittances. We do them at 50% less cost than traditional competitors. We just put out what we call a PayPal Cash Card. It has no monthly fees associated with it. So you can put money onto your PayPal platform, use that basically it's a debit card, and not have any monthly fees associated with it. We really feel like we're at the beginning innings of this in terms of what we can do with the capabilities that we have and the partnerships that we have around the world. But I'm very encouraged by the early signs of this. And I always say inside PayPal, if we can help one person, that's amazing. And if you can help 100, it's like mind-boggling. But we have the opportunity to impact thousands and millions and tens of millions. And to me, that is something that I'm so passionate about, and everyone within the company is, that I think we'll make a difference on that. We'll work in partnership with other companies that have that same philosophy at heart to do that. No one company can do it alone. No one government can do it alone or regulator. There has to be an ecosystem that comes together to go and do this.
We're almost out of time. I'm going to cheat a bit. Let's take 2 or 3 questions, and then I'll leave it up to you guys to wrap up and respond. So, one here.
Oh, hi. So Dan, I know that you mentioned something at the beginning of your talk about supporting small businesses. Doug, I know that Walmart has your incubator, store number 8, that you didn't really touch on today. And as someone, I'm a fan of Jenny Fleiss, and I'm kind of familiar with the Jet Black, but I was wondering if you could talk a little about that and your plans for, supporting small businesses through your incubator.
Okay, and one other question right there.
Doug, I know Walmart has one of the largest trucking logistics platforms in the U.S., and I'm wondering how you're leveraging that, or how it's helping or hurting your business as you compete against Amazon, particularly in the last mile piece of delivering goods.
Great. Okay, why don't we let you guys wrap it up, answering those questions or anything else you want to say.
I'm excited Jenny's part of Walmart too, and the work that they're doing is really cool. Basically, think of a concierge that's digital in nature. So on your phone, you can today move to text. It'll take different forms over time, and you can say, based on the fact that we know you and your family, you can say birthday party for Adam on Saturday. And we know Adam is your nephew and he's 8, and we know what you've bought before, and so we can say, well, here are 3 things, which one do you want? And you push A, B, or C, you're done, and it's in your house next thing you know. So we're doing that in Manhattan today, and it's called Jet Black, and we'll scale it beyond. And over time, we're learning how to code it so that it's not so powered by humans, which it is to a large part today. Last mile is something we're working on hard. We're using crowdsourced capabilities. We're doing associate testing for delivery on our own. We have some autonomous vehicle work underway. Our existing trucking fleet was built for full truckload, pallet, and case, and it's optimized for that, and we're going to leave that alone and then separately build capabilities. Over time, the whole supply chain has to be optimized, because the value of omni-channel on the front end is also existing in the back end. We have a great opportunity to put stores and e-commerce together to anticipate demand, lower costs, and put products in the right place for customers. I'd say we're early innings figuring all that out.
I just close by one, thanks for all the questions, and thanks for having Doug and I here. And I'm very excited about what the future can hold, and any comments and any thoughts that all of you may have on how we can move forward and do this in a responsible way. We're all ears and very eager to hear from you. So thank you.